today. Alberta, are you there to introduce our speaker?
No, Dan, I thought you would be doing it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I was, Alberta. I would.
Well, let me go ahead and do it then. I'd be glad to do it.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. We're really pleased to have Todd Lindner, who is the director of the Cecil Spaceport, with us today. He graduated from Middle Tennessee State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Aerospace Technology. And also in 1998, he got his master's in Aviation Management and Airline Administration. And he has a history of being a corporate pilot, operating business aircraft, and then went into aviation management. He can tell you stories about being the private pilot out of Nashville, Tennessee for some people, but maybe another day. But he now is after a career in senior management and aviation, he's the director of Cecil Spaceport. And as you know, a lot is going on in the area of space these days. We're very pleased to have Todd Lindner with us today, and I'll let him go ahead.
Thank you, Alberta. Thank you for those kind words. Yes, spent time. I've lived outside Nashville for many years and flew out of Nashville and had the pleasure of flying some rather interesting people around. Many of y'all are probably very familiar with Cecil here. None of us probably are as familiar with Cecil as Mr. Phil Voss is. He's been a mainstay here, and I'm glad to see him on this call as well. Can everybody see the presentation? Does anybody have any problems? You good? Good. Okay. Quite a bit's changed since the last time I spoke to the West Jacksonville Rotary. Had a lot of things happen. Had some changes that have been made, and we're going to talk about some of those today. But before we do so, we'll kind of go into the past. Let's see here. Are your slides advancing? Mine or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
Try this. Okay. Let me try this real fast here.
If you click Start Slideshow, will that help?
I'd done that. One more time. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's not advancing. Did it advance on your end? Did y'all see it change? David, see it change?
Yes.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so back in 2010, we originally got our launch operator's license to conduct horizontal launch operations at Cecil. We were the third horizontal launch facility that was licensed in the United States, first using FAA's new licensing format, because what happened was FAA got involved in the commercial space industry. The industry began evolving from a federal operation to a commercial operation. So things somewhat changed as far as licensing goes. But this is a picture of our license here. We keep it on the board. We've had it renewed twice. We have to have it renewed every 5 years. And in January this year, we renewed it once again. This kind of gives you an idea of where the spaceports are in the United States. One thing you'll notice is that there are probably a lot more spaceports out there than you realized. From a federal standpoint, the federal government uses the Cape, Wallops Island, Virginia, and Vandenberg for launch operations. They use White Sands, New Mexico, and Edwards in Southern California near Mojave for operations as well. Other than that, everything else, for the most part, is used by the commercial entity, the private entities. The reason you see companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin sometimes operating out of a federal range is because they've been awarded federal contracts, and the federal government has the right to tell them where they want to conduct their operations. We just got the 2018 numbers. Everything runs about a year behind as far as data collection and gathering goes. But what's important is, or what's, I guess, neat, is that in 2018, the global space economy totaled over $414 billion, which was about a little over an 8% increase from 2017. And this is the first time in history that the global space economy had exceeded $400 billion. So with that being said, it's easy to understand that there was a significant launch in the number of launches. The number of launches increased by 46% over the number of launches 10 years prior to that. And this is the first time that the number of annual launches exceeded 100. Now, keep in mind, you think about the previous slide and think about the locations where there's spaceports. The one thing that slide does not take into account is international spaceports or spaceports outside of the country. So that's why a lot of times there'll be a launch that will occur that you typically don't hear about. We always hear about the ones that are happening down around the Cape or operations that are taking place here at Cecil. But as far as those operations that are taking place outside the country or another range, we typically don't hear about those. The global space economy, if you break it down, 76% of the overall economy, sorry about that, 76% of the overall global space economy was commercial. In other words, non-government or non-foreign government. So it's increasing. The share of operations that are being conducted by the private market. The reason that this is all important is because, and this is something I probably pointed out the last time we talked, and things are getting better. But in 1980, the United States held 100% or controlled 100% of the entire market share of the space industry, both federal and government. Within 30 years, by 2010, the United States controlled 0% of the market. In other words, operations were being conducted outside the United States. And this went on for a couple of years. We slowly but surely started to make a comeback. And now we are controlling upwards toward 50% of the market, if not more, which is very important, especially in these days when we're dealing with our adversaries are the ones who are leading the way for other countries' activity in space. The reason this happened, a lot of people want to point fingers at the fact that the shuttle program ended in 2011. That's very true. It was during the Obama administration, but Obama was not the one that caused this to happen. Actually, in 1984, the Commercial Space Launch Act was signed by Ronald Reagan. And the Commercial Space Launch Act said that by 2011, the shuttle program would be retired and we'd be developing a new vehicle. So time went along, we terminated the shuttle program, but one thing they forgot about was the need to develop a new vehicle. So as we saw just a couple of weeks ago, we finally got a new vehicle that has been developed, and SpaceX successfully delivered 2 astronauts back to the space station, which was great. Very huge moment for the space industry, huge moment for the United States. We started looking at market opportunities and what we're doing here at Cecil. These are the markets that we are currently pursuing. They're kind of in the order in which we are pursuing them. Satellite deployment is number 1. Point-to-point transportation, media, public relations are toward the bottom of that list. The reason being is right now satellite deployment is controlling a huge part of the market. A lot of your telecommunication companies have satellites they want to get out in orbit. They want payloads out there. There are a lot of remote sensing companies that are collecting data that need to get satellites into orbit. So those companies are the companies we're primarily working with today. One question that comes up is point-to-point transportation. Why is point-to-point transportation so far toward the bottom of the list? Because that's the one area that really benefits all of us. I know if I get the opportunity to go, I'm going to definitely take the ride. But right now, if you have a vehicle that's capable of going point to point, and I'm talking like from the United States, Jacksonville, Florida to Prague, for example, which you would do in about 1 hour and 42 minutes, there's not a market for that right now. So right now, the money in the market is in putting payloads into outer space. Therefore, companies, even if you had a company that was capable of conducting point-to-point operations, they are putting all their resources toward delivering payloads to on orbit. These we're going to talk about some of the vehicles, and again, some of the companies we're working with. This is a Concept X vehicle. The big difference between this and your typical corporate jet is the fact that it has a rocket motor that's been mounted or retrofitted to the back of this vehicle. It's a Concept X vehicle because it takes off and lands under turbojet power, just like an airline jet. The only difference is once it reaches a predetermined location and altitude, he will ignite the rocket motor and go into orbit. Light the rocket motor and go to about 320,000 feet. He'll have the capability of deploying payloads that will go on orbit. And then when he comes back, he will conduct some different maneuvers to prevent any damage to the vehicle as he's coming back through the atmosphere. And once he gets down to about 25,000 feet, he will have the capability of relighting his turbojet engines and landing under jet power. Concept Z vehicle, and a Concept, I'll skip Y, but a Concept Y vehicle is just like an X vehicle. The only difference is Concept Y vehicle is under rocket power the entire time he is operating. So therefore, once he fires up using that rocket motor and he takes off and expends all that rocket propellant, he is coming back as a glider. He will not be starting the engine, reigniting the engine. The Concept Z vehicle is defined as a 2-component vehicle. In other words, you have an aircraft that's carrying another craft that will be released, and that other aircraft or other vehicle will ignite the rocket motor and climb into space. Another Concept Z vehicle that I want to mention is the AVM vehicle. This is one of our customers. They've signed an agreement with us, both an operating agreement and a lease agreement to operate from Cecil. This is the Raven X. The Raven X vehicle is a single stage or 2-stage space vehicle. It takes off with jet power. As you can see from these renderings, he has a rocket motor that's attached to the bottom of the aircraft that is launched when he reaches a predetermined location. The big deal or big issue as it relates to this particular aircraft is the fact that it's autonomous. What I mean by that, it flies by itself. It does not have a flight crew. So that is an issue that FAA is wrestling with. Most of you know or are aware of the attitude that FAA has toward drones today, even small drones that you and I can operate. Therefore, This is something that's very specialized. It's something that will have to be proven, probably out in the desert at Mojave or Spaceport America. But once it is received its permitting and certification through FAA, you will be operating from Cecil. This is their website, the AVM website. You can go online and you can tell them, you can order a payload to be delivered at a given orbit or a given location at any given time if you just go to their website. One of the things that's important about AVM, and I think this is how the industry is going to go as a whole, they were awarded a contract by the Army and Air Force to conduct the Aslan 45 contract. Well, they'll be launching test launching a missile from the base of that aircraft, and that rocket or missile will deploy satellites into space. If you have an opportunity, you can look up the Aslan 45 program. You'll get a better description of it than I can actually give you. Generation Orbit is our first launch customer. They've worked with us and we've worked with them for many years now. They just conducted and completed some rocket motor testing here. But they will operate a G3 aircraft, as you see here, and mounted to the belly of that G3 as a rocket. The first launch they will be conducting will be actually this October, November timeframe. And they will be doing a hypersonic operation. In other words, they'll be launching a rocket that will exceed Mach 5. It will not go orbital, it'll be suborbital, and it will go down in the ocean somewhere just this side of the Grand Turks, and it will be recovered at that point. They've been awarded a contract by the Air Force Research Lab to conduct the X-60A program, which is a rocket program that's being sponsored by the Air Force Research Lab and includes a hypersonic element to it as well. This up there on the right, that is the rocket itself that they will be mounting to the base of the G3. This is the rocket motor test that we just did. We've done 3 rocket motor hot fire tests for Generation Orbit now. This was very exciting, and it was a very controlled environment. Most of their operations were conducted during the day. The first time they were here, we got to do a rocket motor test in the middle of the night. That was awesome. It was really cool. It was beautiful. But they are going to be operating and working with a Ursa Major Technologies rocket motor. That motor was developed in Denver, and they wanted to test it, and the Air Force wanted it tested before it was integrated with the rocket itself. So they came here and we tested it, and it was very successful. We just recently entered into, actually we haven't even entered into an agreement. It's a company called Space Perspective. Space Perspective is a stratospheric balloon operator. They currently have an operation in Tucson, Arizona called Worldview. And what Worldview does is Worldview, and this picture was taken actually at Worldview's headquarters in Tucson. What they do is they do a lot of stratospheric balloon operations for the government. They do a lot of remote sensing, collecting data. They have the capability of hovering in one location, which is very conducive to a lot of the data that the government is collecting. Matter of fact, the last, I don't remember the last hurricane, but the hurricane that came through here actually last fall, they launched a balloon, Worldview launched a balloon, and that balloon hovered over the hurricane for days. So it's controllable, and it's very efficient, and it's very very conducive to use with really sensitive equipment. The So what they're going to do is they're coming to the East Coast. They're developing right now a facility. I think their headquarters are going to be down probably at the Cape, but they're going to launch from Cecil and from the shuttle landing facility using, again, a stratospheric balloon. The big difference is this one will not be unmanned. This is for manned purposes, which is really cool. This balloon goes up to about 132,000 feet, stays there for about an hour and a half before coming back down to Earth. It's very smooth. It's very slow. And it gives you an opportunity to really take the view in. And the thing about space perspective more than anything is the fact that much, much cheaper to go with space perspective than it would be to go with like a Virgin Galactic if you want to do a space tourism adventure. Right now, Virgin Galactic is charging about $160,000 a head. Space perspective, they're a little bit less than $20,000, which is, I know it's still a lot of money, but it's much cheaper than $160,000. This is a picture of the gondola that's strapped to the bottom of the balloon itself. The balloon, one thing I left out, because helium expands as it goes up in altitude. When they pressurize the balloon, they only have about between 12 and 18% fulfillment whenever it takes off. And as it goes up, again, the helium will expand. And once they get to 132,000 feet, the balloon will be completely inflated. And when they come back down, what they will do is they will recover in the Atlantic. And once they come down in the Atlantic, they have a specially built boat that will pick the gondola up as it lands. And they will collect the balloon and gondola and bring it back. So how are we going to do this? How do we do this? Cecil itself is over 6,000 acres. That's just the airfield part. We've identified a little over 200 acres over on the east side, as you see by this red box square. We currently have a new hangar and a new office facility that's over on this location. As we move forward, we will continue constructing, developing infrastructure in that area to accommodate the industry. One of the things that's under construction right now is a mission operations control facility. One of the big differences between aviation operations and operations that are associated with the commercial space industry is you have to be able to collect telemetry data. In other words, say telemetry, especially the folks in aviation, that's something we have never dealt with. What telemetry is, that's the ability to collect data wirelessly from a vehicle. And before a operator conducts a launch operation, one of the things they have to submit to FAA and get approved is the telemetry plan. Or in other words, they tell FAA which pieces of data they're going to collect, and it has to be within which tolerances before the mission will have to be terminated, things of that nature. So at the base of this new tower will be the mission operations control facility where all that data will come, and that data will be collected and disseminated necessary by the different parties that are required to conduct those operations. This is the floor plan. This is Cecil. This is right by our office. You see the sidewalk there, middle to the top of the picture. That sidewalk ends in our building. So this is right outside my door. Airspace is the biggest piece of this that we have to deal with. One of the things that rarely people take into consideration is airspace, because it's a limited resource. There's only so much airspace. We're not getting any more of it. We coordinate with the FAA to conduct these operations. This is our flight corridor and operating range that was included in our original airspace letter of agreement with FAA. What we do is we take off from Cecil, fly south and east, across the coastline. Once across the coastline, we will enter what they call a warning area that's controlled by the Navy. Folks at the Navy, I'm working with a gentleman named Mr. Ron McNeil. I've been working with Ron for many years. He's been very, very helpful. I can't say enough good things about him. But when the aircraft enters the warning area, the Navy will take over control. He will conduct his operation and then come back come back to Cecil as a regular aircraft. We have also added some airspace, as you see here, enclosed by this blue line. This is for conducting operations by those aircraft or vehicles that do not have the propellant capacity to go out to the warning area and make it back. So this is airspace that we have included with that letter of agreement. I think that's all I have. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions y'all may have.
Thank you, Todd, for that. What questions do we have for Todd today?
Todd, this is Stu. I've got one. Am I on air there, Dan?
Yeah, Stu.
Okay, I wasn't sure. What about the proliferation of space junk? Is there any way, anybody working on any means of retrieving a lot of that trash and just bring it back to Earth and sell it for scrap metal?
Yes, sir. That's a big issue. You hit the nail on the head. That is probably the biggest. Space junk is probably the biggest contributor to delaying operations. When you're planning for an operation, you're planning an azimuth and a trajectory on an orbit that's going to allow you today to rendezvous with the International Space Station. You've got to time it such that that trajectory will not take you through a very large debris field. When I say a very large debris field, what happened was back in 2009, 8-9 time frame, we had an issue where the Chinese contacted the United States and told us that we, the United States, had a satellite orbiting through their airspace. Now, keep in mind, every country in the world has their own sovereign airspace. This was one of those things that came out of World War II. Countries after World War II said, you know, not only are we going to have our boundaries horizontally, we're going to have them vertically as well. And you saw most countries also developed airlines. You know, Germany, Lufthansa, England, British Airways, Italy, Alitalia, so on and so forth. So that was part of the sovereignness. Well, every country also has the right to establish where those boundaries are. The United States, our national airspace system extends 26 miles off of the coasts, 12 miles off of our borders. It goes up to 60,000 feet. Once you're above 60,000 feet, you're no longer within the national airspace system of the United States. China, on the other hand, China says their airspace extends from their borders vertically to infinity. In other words, there is no ceiling on their airspace. So, and they don't mind if people fly through their airspace, but they want to know ahead of time. So in this case, what happened was the entity had not coordinated with the Chinese. So the Chinese just naturally assumed it was the United States. The United States said it's not us. China said, well, okay, whatever. We'll give you 48 hours to get the satellite out of our airspace. If nothing happens within 48 hours, we're going to take actions to stop it. So 48 hours comes and goes, and sure enough, the Chinese sent a missile into outer space and destroyed the satellite. And it created a debris field about the size of the state of Texas. Therefore, we cannot operate in that area. Keep in mind, it takes a piece of debris smaller than a grain of sand to bring down the space shuttle. So you have to be very, very careful. And by the way, the satellite, come to find out, was owned by the Weather Channel in Atlanta. They had launched, again, they had figured out they could launch from another country much cheaper, because we, the United States, try to play by the rules. We have environmental laws that we try to follow. We have different policies and procedures that are legalities. If you go to India, they don't care. They don't care about environmental laws. They don't care about, all they want is your money. So if you got the money, they're going to make it happen. So they did. But unfortunately, there had been no coordination with the United States, with the Chinese. Hope that answers your question.
Hey, Todd, Philippe here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a quick question for you. So you mentioned that point-to-point travel is not viable right now, but in the future, when it is, would there be fitness requirements for the people traveling in point-to-point travel different from what it is from a regular flight?
Yes and no. Let's back up one step. I cannot say that it's viable right now. Personally, I think point-to-point transportation is now viable. And what I mean by that is I think you're going to see like FedEx, UPS, DHL step up, probably be the first ones to operate commercial space vehicles point-to-point. For those of us who need a package within the next hour, or the medical industry, because just think about if you need a kidney or you need a heart, just think how small that circle is now as compared to what it would be if you're traveling 5 or 6 times the speed of sound. It would be endless. So I like the way you phrase that. But no, there will not, the medical requirements will be on you. You'll be required to sign a document that says that you are physically fit and the operator will not be held liable for this operation. At the same time, keep in mind also, there'll be less than 2 Gs of force placed upon you. I don't look and see that there will be physical requirements much greater than what we have on the airlines today. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Other questions for Todd at this time?
Todd, it's Stu again about the space junk. Is there any program to retrieve that stuff? I understand how a lot of it got there. A lot of it's just burned out equipment. But
Thank you.
anyway, clean it up.
I'm sorry about that. Yes, sir. I apologize. Yes. So what they're doing is there's a company right now that's developing a device, for lack of a better term, it's very similar to a fishnet that will be deployed to collect debris. And as that net collects debris, what they will do once it reaches a certain capacity, they will release that fishnet. And once they do, the mass will be so great that it will fall into Earth's gravity field and burn up coming through the atmosphere. That's one means. There have been a couple other options or alternatives that are being considered. One in particular is to first use a magnetized or use magnets to collect as much of the magnetic material as they can. That material that's not magnetic, they will use a device that looks very similar to a rake to pull it all together, and then try to drag it to the atmosphere where it will burn up, coming down toward gravity.
Good. Thank you very much. That's interesting.
The company that's doing that in particular, I'll tell you one company to look at, Sierra Nevada Corporation, not the beer company, okay? This is Sierra Nevada Aerospace. One of the things, I don't know if you all realize this or not, but there's a vehicle, an aircraft, that the military operates called a Super Tucano. It's constructed by Embraer, and it's being assembled right now at Jackson International Airport. That's where the facility is. But the company that designed the Super Tucano is Sierra Nevada Corporation. And we have a very close working relationship with them. They were awarded one of the commercial crew contracts. Their vehicle operates very similar to the space shuttle, significantly smaller than the space shuttle, but the concept of operations is very similar. And they have more than one idea as far as it relates to retrieving space debris. Keep in mind, today, regulation has been passed. If any payload that you deploy on orbit, you're responsible for it. It's a cradle to grave type law. So once you put something out there in orbit, you're going to be responsible for bringing it back or having to have a means of getting it out of space. So that's definitely going to help things going forward.
Todd, this is Dan Maloney. You may have mentioned, but approximately how many launches are occurring globally each year?
In 2018, there were a little over 100. Last year, there were more than that. This year, it's going to be record-setting. We'll probably see, well, SpaceX alone wants to conduct 48 launches this year. That's almost one a week. So if you take that into consideration and add that to what's already been happening, you're going to see numbers up around 150 to 200 launches this year. Another thing to keep in mind is the Europeans are getting very, very active in the space industry. Italy, the Italian Space Agency, the European Space Agency, and other parts of Europe are getting very plugged in. What's crazy is Denmark, of all places. Denmark does not have a space agency per se. Everybody that does space in Denmark does it as a hobby. It's a leisure. It's fun. And it's crazy. What's crazy is they're making more headway than most companies are.
Wow. We have time.
This is Joe Eberly. I wanted to, with all these different country or agencies, there's no collaboration? You were talking about the Weather Channel sending up that nobody knew who it was. So there's no coordination between the various nations as to what's going up and when? So
that's a great question, Joe. What happened was shortly thereafter, in the 2012 timeframe, regulations were passed that stipulated the coordination between the Federal Aviation Administration and government entities within the United States. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, got involved in this as well, and they have put forth and passed the necessary legislation that requires coordination among the entities before a launch occurs. I'll give you an example of that. Before we can conduct an operation here, like I said, we're getting ready for a launch operation right now, which will be conducted in October. We're doing a lot of coordination regarding airspace with FAA right now, and as one of the things that we have to do in accordance with our letter of agreement with FAA is we have to reach out to those international entities in order to make sure that nobody gets in the way of anybody else.
Okay, I think that concludes. We're gonna sew it up here. Todd, you've given us a really, really wonderful presentation. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, I was always extremely proud of our nation's space achievements, and I think your presentation has given us a lot of hope for a really fascinating and encouraging future. So thank you for that. You may have detected that Stu Irwin is the Elon Musk of our club. I don't know if you picked up on that.
That's good.
I think Stu's looking for another. I think he's looking for a second profession up in space. But we may have some candidates, not Stu, but we may have some candidates for one-way trips to space. So let us know when that's possible. Just as a reminder, so Todd, usually I'm giving a gift to you right now, a token of our appreciation. Just know that you're welcome back to our club anytime, and we look forward to hearing about the next incarnations going on out at Cecil. So Captain Voss gave us a great tour out there, and we hope to get back there personally once again.